Welcome to the Unexpected Podcast, where your hosts, Lee and Amy, carry on simple conversations about everything from life experiences, the current culture, God, and everything in between. And because Lee has put Amy through years of surprises, this is her time to surprise him with unexpected topics he won't be privy to until the microphone is on and the camera is rolling. This is the Unexpected Podcast. Welcome to
Unexpected.
Another episode of the Unexpected Podcast.
Good to see you again.
Yep, it is good to see you guys. And
I think I'm going to start talking with the radio voice. What do you think?
Great. I like it.
Welcome to Unexpected.
Okay, I will do that too. I used to temporarily be a college radio DJ, and I talked with much more sophistication than I am now. But I think we'll move on.
Okay.
Okay, you talk however you like.
Sounds good. I think I'm going to speak in a little bit more of an eloquent words.
It could be eloquent.
Eloquent.
As well as elegant,
and elegant
I suppose.
Words. Yes.
You're not going to do that the whole time,
No,
are
I'm
you?
not. No.
Oh, good. All right,
No,
great. All right. Well, here we are, just the two of us.
Just the two of us.
And we're going to talk about something today.
What do we got today, Ames?
Well, as you guys may know or may not know, we have a topic, but Lee doesn't know what the topic is.
Nope.
And we'll just jump into it. And rather than giving this topic a heading or posing an initial question, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what's on my mind, and then we'll get into getting your input.
Okay.
How's that?
Sounds like a plan, Stan.
Great. You know that you and I both love a good story, a good book, or a good movie. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I love about literature is that oftentimes it will convey meaning in a way that maybe you don't get in other places. Or for me, a lot of times I think that, reading well-written literature will teach me something about myself.
Right. And
sometimes it will also reinforce even something biblical, even something scriptural.
Right.
And so I have been reading a book that I had never read before. Okay. It's Forster's Howard's End.
Howard's End.
Yes. You've probably heard me quote the movie before.
I have, yes.
It's a great movie. The movie came out in the 90s, and I had seen that movie. And I've read some other Forster, but I'd never read this particular book. So been reading it. And there was something that was said in the book that I just thought was something that we could chew on for a minute. How's that?
Yummy.
Yeah. So, all right, this is interesting. Now, let me give you just a quick premise of the story. You know, it's a book that's set in I don't know the exact time period, the 1800s. And so there's a kind of this clash of different segments of society coming together, So you have the more traditionalists, and then you have the more like modernists who are kind of pushing for technology, hard work, and different values from the old way of doing things. And then you have someone from the very poor segment of society. So there's all this interaction of different people coming from different walks of life.
Yeah.
And so this is great. Now you have to know something about this author because he'll say things not that he means, but he's being somewhat ironic. He's conveying kind of what the thinking was at that time. Okay. So he said this. He said, "We are not concerned with the very poor. They are unthinkable and only to be approached by the statistician or the poet."
The statistician or the poet.
Right. And so he's conveying this idea that, we're over here, the poor are over there. Now, we don't ignore them. We may, when he brings up the idea of they're only to be approached by the statistician, meaning, we're going to think about them, numbers, statistics. We're going to think of them as part of this society. We don't go near them and we don't interact with them, but we acknowledge that they exist in our statistics. likewise, it says they should only be approached by the poet. In other words, we may romanticize the poor and how they are, or we may romanticize or talk eloquently about this segment of society, but we don't get our hands dirty, in other
Mm-hmm.
words.
Mm-hmm.
So he's being ironic, really, and alluding to the fact that segments of culture are far removed sometimes from other segments of culture,
No.
but certain segments who are very removed oftentimes think they have something to say about those with whom they don't actually interact.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think there's so
That's
much
there's a lot.
there's so
Man, that's a
much
lot to unwrap.
packed. There's so much packed into that
Wow.
sentence, and what it conveys to me is the idea of idealism.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to delve into that word a little bit because an idealist will often have some idea about how things are supposed to be. Oftentimes, though, it's in an impractical way. And oftentimes it's, well, again, it's the idea of I may not get my hands dirty. I may not interact in this segment
Yeah.
of society,
But
I have something to say about it.
Yeah.
Have you ever witnessed that kind of
Have I ever
thing?
witnessed? I think everybody in the United States and everywhere else in the whole world has witnessed this
Right.
as being part of a social standard, if there's any social standard
Yeah.
that's ever been, had.
Yeah.
It has been that. And, that's the one thing that comes to mind is a person with experiential knowledge is never at the mercy of a person with a philosophical thought.
Right. Right. And I've heard you say that many times. And I like
that to me, so we've got a lot of that going on right now.
Mhm.
We have people making decisions
Mm-hmm.
for us lower class people
Mm-hmm.
that have no idea
Right.
about what we're going through.
Right. Sure.
Whether that's with your job,
Mm-hmm.
with the government,
Mm-hmm.
with society, even in the church.
Yeah.
It has bled into every part of society, I think.
And I think that begs the question, is it because of indifference and ignorance, or is it also from like a contempt? And I think
Yeah.
I think both are at play. But here's something that I was thinking about when I read this part of the book also. And I've actually witnessed this where I've had people come to me and say something like, in reference to maybe a person who was very much an idealist, someone who took pride in speaking out on behalf of certain segments, say, of a marginalized segment of society. And yet those same people from maybe that marginalized segment of society have conveyed to me that I wonder if those people even like me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they don't get the sense that they're necessarily cared for. They may get the feeling that they're someone's project. And
Right.
you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
we don't want to, we don't want to ever be guilty of that.
I feel like that at times teachers, you've taught classes, I've taught classes, higher education, high school.
I taught elementary
You
school.
taught elementary school. We were able to. Did you ever speak down to the students? Which a lot of teachers, a lot of, and I'm generalizing, but there are great teachers, there are great professors, there are great elementary school teachers that don't talk down to their kids,
Right.
or talk to them as though they're ignorant, but they speak to the children in a way that is uplifting and building.
Yeah.
But then there are those who have an axe to grind because they didn't do too good in school, or they got picked on in school. So they're, for instance, scenario, kid goes to school, gets beat up all the time, gets picked on all the time. Don't condone that. Not a good thing. And I'm not making excuses for the bullying. But I will say that when they get older and they decide some people hold a grudge,
Mm-hmm.
and so they get into that.
Mm-hmm.
They move their way up
Mm-hmm.
through society, and they become that teacher, and then the person that picked on them, their kid,
Mm-hmm.
their
Or someone who reminds them
somebody
of the
that reminds
person
them
that
of that
picked on
person,
them.
or even a direct descendant of
Mhm.
that person that picked on them.
Mm-hmm.
They got a choice to make.
Yeah.
They're either going to talk down to that person as a way to get back to that person
Mm-hmm.
who picked on them,
Right.
or they treat them better than they were treated
Mm.
and show them respect.
Right.
The right way to do it is show the respect. Don't talk down.
Right.
But I think that travels on up into high school.
Mhm.
That travels on up into college.
Mhm.
And then it travels into the workforce.
Yeah.
And then it travels into government. And so
Yeah.
government, I don't want to get on some political high horse or political platform or
Right.
anything like that. But I will say, before anybody votes for anybody, know who the candidate is,
Mm-hmm.
know what they stand for. And if you can't figure it out, which most of the time you can't
Yeah.
with politicians
Right.
until they're in,
Right.
they'll say anything to get in, a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And not putting politicians down. There's some really good ones. There's some really bad ones. Nah, I
Lot
try
of bad
not.
ones,
A
but
lot of
yeah, we won't go there
I don't
tonight.
want to go there too
Yeah.
deep.
Yeah.
But they're detached from reality because
Right.
they've not spent enough time in society and learned the social
Right.
norms of people who don't exactly fit the
Right.
mold of where
Right.
they want people to be. So they feel
Right.
like they're a savior. They have
Yeah.
a savior mentality. I'm going to save the little guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to help the little guy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and just raise taxes and get things going and programs and all
Yeah.
of this. And then I'm going to charge them more taxes, and then I'm going to get them hooked.
Right. And in turn,
And in
really
turn,
harm society.
harm society.
Yeah. And really, this brings me to the idea of the word idealism.
Mhm.
Because now there's a biblical idealism that is
Mhm.
good.
Yeah.
But most of the time, human idealism just becomes problematic. And it's a very dangerous ideology
Wow.
to become so idealistic. Because again, it's entwined with generally unrealistic expectations.
Mhm.
And I have this other quote that I think is really good. It's by a guy named, I don't even know how you say his name, if it's Peter Senge. He's somebody that writes about emotional intelligence and so forth.
Mhm.
But this is really good. He says, scratch the surface of most cynics and you find a frustrated idealist. Someone who made the mistake of converting his ideals into expectations.
Yes.
And so I think we're all definitely guilty of this
Yes.
on some level.
Yeah.
Whether it's on a micro level or a macro level. So,
Right.
we're guilty of this in our own, we might even apply this to ourselves. Like,
Right.
this is the ideal for myself that I'm setting for myself. And oftentimes it can be something that's unrealistic.
Right.
And then we find ourselves frustrated because instead of making God our God, we've made our idealistic expectations our God.
And then we force other people to adopt our ideals
Mm-hmm.
as their own.
Mhm.
And if they don't, then we get frustrated with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because we forget that they've got their own ideas
Mm-hmm.
and they have their own individual thought,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not able to influence that.
Mm-hmm.
We influence it to a degree, and we try to push the agenda, and then it backfires on us, and it just causes turmoil.
Right.
Share your thought, share your idea, and if it's accepted,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully it helps somebody. But if your idea is based on this humanistic thought, this place of being self-centered, anything. Okay, so Sarah and Abraham, prime example.
Mm-hmm.
Here, Abraham, I can't have children, so here, take my servant and have a child with her. Was that the promise of God? No, it was not the promise of God.
God had made a promise, but that
Man-
was not the way.
Man
to the
took it
promise.
into his own hands to make the promise of God come to pass,
Right.
which negates the promise of
Right,
God for
right.
that moment, because that was not the promise of God. That was the thought of man. And then later on, I believe it was Jacob, did the same thing. He went and got Leah, and he got tricked, got Leah, and then he got Rebecca.
Right.
And then what did they do? Rebecca's like, I can't have children.
Yep.
Here, take my
My
servant
servant.
and have children. It's like this generational curse thing of man taking it over for God.
Right.
When you do that, you are adopting a God complex. You are thinking that you're above what God promised. You're
And it never
above-
goes well.
It never goes well.
Right.
Until to this day, that story has affected Jacob or Israel. Not to go into politics,
Yeah.
but just the facts of the Bible and historically, that is still going on, this turmoil over
Right.
Israel
Right.
making the wrong decisions.
Right. And then throughout history, there have been different times during history where people had this idea that they were going to set up a utopian society.
Yes.
A utopia. We're going to create the perfect society. This is what we need. And this is funny because I remember, young people tend to be more idealistic, and that's natural. It's normal.
It's good.
It is good because it forces you to think and to work and strive towards goals. But then later you gain more wisdom and you realize, okay, this was a good idea, but maybe it needs to be course corrected a little bit. So I remember some friends and I like sitting up really late one night, and we were going to create our own political party. And it's so funny because I can remember now, it was all very idealistic.
Right.
There'll be universal this, and this will be perfect, and we'll take care of all of this.
What was the party name?
I don't remember if we ever came up with a name. I don't know. This was my same group of friends that we all had romantic poet names. I was John Keats. But anyway, that's beside the point.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We were like that. And that's, young people are like that.
Yeah.
And again, that's normal and that's natural. But it's funny to think now because some people don't outgrow that. And then they take that on to full adulthood and try to declare that society should be this way. And it doesn't mean that there aren't ideals. But again, when it's trying to do it in man's strength, human strength.
Do you think when somebody gets caught up in their own man idea, when we say man, we mean humans, our own humanistic ideas, that they get stuck in that idea and they never are able to grow because they don't hear other things that are out there, other thoughts, other ideas. So they're not able to really make an informed decision about life. So, lack of knowledge. My people perish for a...
Right. Lack of knowledge.
Lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
So when we're not to seek knowledge for the sake of seeking knowledge. We're supposed to seek knowledge because without knowledge, we're not going to make it.
Right.
Because if you don't know how to feed yourself, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to go out and get a job and actually work and get a job that sustaining your home and your life, it's not going to be good. If you don't work, you don't eat.
Right.
If you don't go out and get a job, you don't eat unless the government comes in and takes care of you, and then you get mad because you didn't get your check or your food stamps. Well, they don't do food stamps, it's EBTs. Right. And nothing wrong with that. When you need help, you need help. And I like some of these programs because they do help people. But I'm saying you shouldn't what's the word? Settle. You shouldn't settle. You shouldn't be satisfied with the status quo at the moment of being dependent on somebody else. You should be able to go out and fend for yourself, hunt for yourself, gather for yourself, and actually trust God to make a way for your life to be okay.
Right. Because God's way, it's God's kingdom. his kingdom is the ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're striving for.
Right.
And there's a scriptural basis. And we know that, at Christ's final return, when he restores all things,
Right.
then we'll reach that ideal state.
Yeah.
But until then, we're just striving towards it, and we're trying to be the salt and light and be the influence in society. But we're never going to be able to force people into
No.
what our idea of society should be. It's never going to happen.
No. This idea of utopia won't happen until God comes back with the holy city and New Jerusalem, and he makes his home on earth, and he becomes the light, and we have no need of the sun and all of that. Of course, Revelation, if you haven't read Revelation and Ezekiel, this is some good stuff, just thinking about all of that. People, let's point this in on us. We have our own ideas about how life is supposed to be. Even in this moment, in this time right now, we have our ideas. But we don't know how to execute them in the way that we should all the time. And so we have plans, we have ideas, but what do we do when that falls to the side? We get depressed. We get when it fails, we get depressed, we get down, we say, "Oh, maybe it's never going to happen. Maybe this is not going to happen." But you should just get excited and say, "All right, what's the next adventure?
Yeah.
What's our next adventure?
Right.
What are we
Right.
What's this next unexpected thing in our life that we can grasp and go for?" Because life is unexpected.
Right. And also finding your own place in society, because I think as you grow in wisdom, you realize there's not a one size fits all for all people.
Right.
So in other words, the Lord may direct us to, start a garden or, do certain things. And sometimes people have a tendency to just because they're doing something that's working for their family, then they think everybody should do that thing. But not every family is alike.
No.
Not every individual is called to the same thing. And wisdom is realizing we're all going to do it a little differently.
And we've said it. Why do they get to go?
Yeah.
We've said it. Why do they get to go on vacation all the time? Why do they get? How did they get their yard looking that nice? How does their home stay so perfect?
Yeah.
How does this happen? How? How? I don't know why I went into that. But it is funny. It's a comical thing, but it's a sad thing. We shouldn't be worried about what everybody else is doing. We need to look at what is set before us, and what are we going to be doing with our life in Christ, with our kids, with our friends. How are we going to be sociable enough to be where people want to come back around and hang with us, and we not drain the life out of them because we're always complaining about what we don't have?
Right.
Why do we complain about what we don't have?
I don't know.
Why can't we be satisfied? Be content in such as places that we are.
Exactly.
Be content.
Exactly. I think I reshared this the other day on social media, something that someone else had posted, but it said something like, the job that you dread going to is somebody else's dream job. The home that you live in that you complain about sometimes, that will be somebody else's dream house.
Yep.
And so just bringing that back around, that again, we shouldn't be making comparisons.
Nope.
And then we've got to be thankful for where we are. I have one final. You go ahead.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And to go back to looking down on people, those who know us and have been a part of what we've seen and all knows that we try our best to not look down on people and be treated like we've been treated in the past as less than.
Yeah.
We know what it's like to be treated as less than.
Right.
Oh, they're just drug addicts, or they're just, somebody who will eventually mess up. They're not smart enough.
Right.
That old thing of I went to get a job and I don't have enough experience.
Right.
So I go get experience and I go back to the same place. They say, "Oh, you don't have enough education."
Right.
and then you go and get an education, you come back and you got a little bit of experience, a little bit of education, and they're like, oh, we're not hiring because we're full.
Yeah.
Or you don't fit these criteria.
Right. Right.
There are certain things in life you just have to take a chance on. Sometimes people are smart enough to be able to come into your company and adapt to the position. Sometimes take a chance, and some companies do.
Right.
But looking at them as less than because they don't meet the criteria that it's like everybody. I felt like I was in an interview with a lot of people, not just jobs, but with like people before, because they see us as somebody who may be less than. Not anymore. I mean, it doesn't happen as much anymore, but I remember when we were young. Oh, you're too young. You're too. You don't have enough experience in life to know what you're talking about. You can't say anything about that. You don't need to be talking about that.
Right. It's not to say that there wasn't more to learn.
Oh, no,
of course. But
sometimes you just got to listen. Let
That's
people
true.
talk it out.
That is the truth. Yeah. So this kind of brings me to a final thought that I had written down, because I think it ties in to what we're talking about, when you have these certain attitudes in society. And one thing that I've learned and observed, and then I, try to look at my own life, is that sometimes people can have actually the right ideas. They understand truth. They understand what's right and wrong. They understand biblical truth. And so we might say that they have good macro values. In other words, their view of society and the way society should be is really good. But then when you get down on the micro level in relationships, they maybe are really terrible. They might just be really nasty. It's like, okay, sure, you've got all the right ideas, but you're not really a nice person. And then the reverse can be true. There's a lot of people out there, they're kind, one-on-one, they're great, but they got some wacko ideas and sometimes some non-biblical ideas, and they're just some kind of crazy ideas. And so I think it's important that we, have both.
My grandfather used to tell me, beauty's only skin deep, but ugly is to the bone. And that's the truth.
Talking about the inner
He's
life.
talking about the inner life.
Right.
Ugly is to the bone. Beauty is only skin deep. This outer shell doesn't determine whether you're a beautiful person or a ugly person.
Right.
It's the intent and the content of the character.
Have you ever encountered people who are maybe not the most physically attractive, but they carry so much inner beauty that they just seem like they're
beautiful?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think we'll all be made super beautiful, in heaven.
Yeah.
Every person will be beautiful inside and out, but it is that inner beauty that matters the most.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
Man, this one went deep.
A little deep.
We went a little deep on this one.
A little deep. Thank you, Ian Forster. Thank you, Howard's End.
Yes.
Great book.
Hopefully we didn't go too deep for you, but we enjoyed conversation.
We're just figuring things out.
This is unexpected. We go deep or we're kind of shallow. I mean, either way, it's fun, and we're having a good conversation.
And you got back to your normal voice.
I got back to my normal voice.
And not your...
My radio voice.
Oh, your radio voice.
Yes.
All right. Well, you want to tell everyone goodbye in your radio voice?
Thank you for watching. We are so happy to be able to bring this podcast to you. We are unexpected. Amy and Lee. Have a great day. Bye.
That was funny. Thanks, guys.
My battery died, so part of it was cut off on this camera.
Oh, that's fine.
For like a minute.
Oh, okay.
My battery died.
Let's dump this. Do you want...
Don't forget to like this video and please subscribe to our channel. Drop your comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If you prefer audio podcasts, please follow us on your favorite streaming platform.